morning, listeners. Max here for your next Morning with Max show. Today's date is June 25th, 2026. So, obviously, a lot of things in the headlines the past day or so, and we're going to talk about that. And since this is a pretty bipartisan thing, I'm okay with bringing up my opinion on it. So, here we go. So, as you know, Congress just passed the biggest housing bill in 30 years, so they're saying. And yesterday, the president had announced that he's canceled the signing. Not vetoing it, but canceling the signing. But before we get into that, let's talk about what this bill is, because there's a lot of different things that talk about what's in this bill, and I'm sure there's a lot of fluff just like everything else. But what's the meat and what actually affects you? So the big headline is, it's going to help buyers, sellers, and investors, or affect buyers, sellers, and investors. And basically, the big headline thing is it bans corporate investors. And essentially how they're defining this is for companies or people that own over 350 single-family homes, and it prevents them from buying more. How they're going to police that, especially when people are buying cash, not really sure how that's going to work, how they're going to inform that or enforce that. I'm not really sure. Something that's really interesting, which I think will affect more people, is that it drops the permanent chassis rule on manufactured homes. So basically, why this is so important is, first of all, it can reduce the cost of building manufactured homes. There's a really bad rap out there. There's always been on mobile homes. And I just think that's just not a fair assessment anymore. Due to a lot of the building regulations that exist, I'm not a fan of a lot of them, but, people stop buying them for a little while, and there's always that bad rap that they have. New manufactured homes are actually pretty high quality. You just got to stay on top of the manufacturer, and a lot of them come with 1-year warranties, which is really helpful for people. I've seen a lot of mixed, quality in them, so it's just really important when you're in the house to check it out. Make sure you do an inspection, even if it's brand new, to do that. Also, financing-wise, a lot of lenders won't finance manufactured or mobile homes because there's wheels and a chassis on them, and they won't lend on something that somebody could drive up to, hook up to their truck, and drive away. That's not a very safe bet for them. So that's the second thing. You may be able to get better financing terms on manufactured homes, because right now it's usually a higher down payment, and the upfront cost is a lot higher. You might even get an upfront cost for a more expensive non-manufactured home. So that's why I think that this is really going to help a lot of people. It sends more federal dollars to towns that approve more building. This is really important. I think this is something where I may get some pushback on, but I think a lot of towns need more housing, and I think there's a correct way to do it, and I think there's a wrong way to do it. Obviously, you don't want to have low-income housing that isn't maintained, doesn't look good, and maybe a subtraction on the town, but you need that starter home for people that want to move to the area to help with those starter jobs and help that town continue to grow, because if you just have all these rich people in a particular town, who don't want this sort of housing, saying that it's going to decrease their home values, even though their home values have increased substantially over the past, forever years, especially people that have lived in their homes for 20, 30, 40 years. Even if affordable housing is put near their homes, they're not going to ever see the prices of homes that were when they bought them. So some people being a little selfish, and I think that this is very important. Hopefully it encourages more local legislatures to encourage some more affordable housing, because push comes to shove, we need it. Like I've stated before, I am a conservationist. I love the outdoors, but I think that there's a way to create more affordable housing and not knock down all the forests. There's always an even balance. There's always a compromise, and we can reach that, I believe. So the biggest thing that this is hoping to do is create more supply and competition in the market, because New England in particular is struggling with the supply problem. You're not seeing this in the more metro areas like the Floridas, like the Texas, like the Californias, the Arizonas, where there's a bunch of land that they can build on, and it's sort of unlimited. But I think this will really help us out in terms of sending the federal dollars and removing the permanent chassis rule on manufactured homes. Why it won't affect New England in terms of banning the big corporate investors, mainly because I believe the statistic is a very low percentage of these big investors own properties in New Hampshire or New England in particular. It is a problem in the bigger metros. I've seen as high as like 25% of the single family homes in Atlanta. I could be completely wrong. I'm kind of talking out of my butt there, but I thought I saw that statistic at one point. So, that's huge. And I think for our area, though, not so much. What I would like to see in addition to this is maybe some federal cutbacks on capital gains and try to encourage people to sell their homes who are using the excuse that they don't want to sell because of the taxes that they're going to have to pay on it. Rightfully so, because especially in some states, you can be paying a lot of money in capital gains. And if you don't like the government, I don't blame you for not wanting to pay that. So let's talk about basically what good old Donald Trump is doing right now, saying that he's canceling the signing. So he hasn't vetoed it yet, and I think right now he's kind of attempting to use it as leverage because he wants, as they've wanted for the past few months or ever since this other bill came out, is a Save America Act to be signed. The thing is with that is it's a waiting game because if the president doesn't veto it within 10 days, it is passed to law automatically. So that's important to note. So to see how that works out will be very interesting. But, I wanted to touch on this a little bit just so we filled in some information there on how it's going to affect the market. I think this is a good move in the right direction. Not sure how I'm going to be feeling about limitations on private businesses and buying up all these single family homes. I feel like there should be more niche guidelines for that. Maybe having a sort of percentage in a certain area, and once it reaches that certain percentage, nobody can buy it. But automatically limiting companies from buying properties, not really a fan of that. I think, like I said, it needs to be a little bit more niche. But so that's our news for today. I hope you guys learned something really quick for your driving to work. And if you ever have any topics that you want me to touch on, please contact me. You know where to find my information. You can comment on Spotify now, so make sure you comment on these videos. I'm going to put some polls or some questions to have people interact with them with. But thanks, and make sure to leave us a review, and I will see you on Monday.